Welcome to Titusville Spotlight. I'm Harvey. This is the fabulous ED. We're your hosts. And this is a show about Titusville, things concerning Titusville.
Whatever we want.
Mims, Christmas, Port St. John's. And it's not scientific, it's just our opinions and our impressions of things. Edie, first thing on the business, we got to decide what are we going to call people from Titusville? Titusvillians, Titusvillites, Titusvillers?
Well, according to the North Brevard Historical Society, we're Titusvillians.
There you go. How about Mims? Mimites, Mimmers,
Oh boy.
Mimsians?
I like Mimsians.
Mimsians. I don't think Mimsians is
great.
official, but how about Mimites?
Okay.
Mimites. What kind of no Mimmers?
Oh, Mimmers. Okay.
Mimmers. We're going to call them not mummers, Mimmers. Okay, Mimmers. And Port St. John is, of course, Port St. Johnians, because why wouldn't it be? Tell us about the structure of our show.
Pretty much any way we want it.
Yeah, there is none. It's whatever we feel like saying, but we're going to try to entertain you and hopefully bring you some information. The first section is a short editorial on Titusville that I have a few things to say. So let's hear what I got to say about Titusville, and we'll be right back.
Edie, I want to talk about Titusville tonight. I've lived in Titusville 11 years. I like it here. I grew up in Pompano Beach. It kind of reminds me of Pompano, about 150 miles south of here, and 40 years ago. Titusville is one of the few places you can buy a house for $100,000 to $200,000, get a good house, raise your family. Schools are good. Traffic is low. So why aren't we overcrowded with people? Well, first let's take a look at the many advantages I think Titusville has got. Number one, we've got the Indian River Lagoon, one of the great rivers on the country, salt water. It's part of the Intercoastal Waterway. We have spoil islands. You can fish. You can canoe. We have to the east of us Playa Linda Beach, one of the great beaches on the East Coast. It's got miles of unbroken shoreline, no development. It's a great place to go to bring the kids. You want to go surfing, if you want to go down to the pier, there's Cocoa Beach. It's a little more beach activity down there, but it's only about 20 minutes away. Cocoa Beach is a great place. We've got the port. Port Canaveral has become one of the leading cruising ports in the world. You can take cruises to almost anywhere on the island. It's also got restaurants. It's got some great dining. Right out here, we've got the Merritt Island Reserve. On the reserve, you can go fishing. You can go hiking. It's one of the great places in the East Coast for watching birds. There's the roseate ibis. We're the only place that they really come in the continental U.S. So we've got a wild animal park right in our own backyard here. There's hiking trails. There's some hiking trails out on Merritt Island. We've also got some right here in Titusville. So we have a lot of natural advantages as far as things to do around here. Here's a guy who's fishing off a kayak. You can go canoeing. You can go kayaking. This gentleman is fishing in the Haulover Canal. Just to the north of us is the Mosquito Lagoon, redfish capital of the world. If you like freshwater, there's airboating, there's lakes, there's freshwater fishing. Just to the east of us, we have the Ocala National Forest, 2 hours away. Here is the St. Johns River. Goes right up the Ocala National Forest for those of you who like boating on a quiet river setting. Within the Ocala National Forest, we have some of the greatest springs in the country for snorkeling, canoeing. You won't find water this clear anywhere in the world. Less than 2 hours away. If you really have to get away, we're a half hour from Orlando International Airport. You can get to anywhere in the world. It's one of the busiest airports in the world, and the prices are fairly cheap because it is so busy. If you've got to go shopping, we have a brand new mall here in Titusville, Titus Landing, and so we have almost anything you could want to do right here. Why aren't we inundated with people? Well, this is what I want to talk about. I think the people who run the city of Titusville are generally hardworking people who do their jobs, and in many cases they do their jobs with a lot of adversity. But the people who have driven this city, the people who have wanted it to basically be a retirement center, have missed the boat. We don't have the development, we don't have any kind of program to bring in industry to provide jobs for people in this town, and we haven't for some time. Now, why is that? Well, I don't know. But I can tell you this, we have the highest water rates of anybody around. We have the highest building permit rates of anybody around. And if you've ever dealt with the people down there getting building permits and trying to deal with City Hall, It's extremely frustrating. I know of several businesses who were going to relocate here who simply said, no, I'm not going to deal with the city of Titusville, and they relocated elsewhere, which I think was okay with the city of Titusville. So we aren't inundated with overdevelopment, and that may be because the city is either inept or they're geniuses. I can't figure out which. So next time you see a city employee down there, give them a big thumbs up. You're either doing something right or very wrong. That's all I got to say.
All right, we're back. I hope my salty language didn't offend you, Tom. The next section we're going to talk about is some of the history of Titusville. And this is some information that Edie gathered, things I didn't know about Titusville. I didn't know Titusville burned to the ground at one time. And you documented a number of hotels that were downtown, but you didn't tell our viewer which one was the brothel. And that's what people are going to want to know.
Of course.
Which one was the brothel?
Well, it could have been Titus House, it could have been the Indian River Hotel, or even Hotel Dixie.
There you go. Probably all three.
Because he liked to cater to the whatever people wanted to pay for.
Yeah, Colonel Titus was not only a soldier of fortune, he was a ultimate capitalist. And he built a fabulous hotel here in town. Titusville was known far and wide for this hotel. So I'm going to do the narration on this. Let's hear a little bit about the history of Titusville.
Harvey here. Normally Edie would be giving this section, but she had to run off, so I'm going to fill in for her for a minute. This is the section on the history of Titusville and a little bit about some interesting facts which Edie has found out and I'm going to present. Titusville was founded right after the Civil War. It's gone through a series of booms and busts, and much like the state of Florida. Now, the state of Florida outside of the state of Florida is known as a region that has had nothing but booms and busts its entire history. For those of us who are from Florida, I don't think we've had any more boom and bust times than any other region of the country. Ours have probably been more publicized. But Titusville has gone through a series of growth and then a series of contractions since it was formed. Now, Titusville was originally founded after the Civil War. There were certainly people here, but it wasn't organized into an actual community until Colonel Henry Titus came. Colonel Titus had been an officer, I believe, in the Confederacy. Before that, he had fought in a number of battles through Central America. He was something of a mercenary, and I believe that he fought for the Confederacy not because he was a particular believer in their cause. They simply needed competent, experienced officers, and he was one. So he basically got a job with them. After the war, he probably didn't know exactly what the Union was going to do, and he was something of a wanted man for some of his other activities, which we're not altogether sure about, but he wasn't altogether above board either. So he came to the region which became Titusville because his wife owned property here. Edie tells me his wife was named Mary Hopkins, was her maiden name, and I believe Hopkins Avenue is named after her. So Colonel Titus came down here, and legend is that he and Captain Rice played dominoes to see who was going to get to name the town. That's not quite true. When he came down here, he was the postmaster, and he actually owned the post office. He was very involved in the mail system, and he got to name the town because he owned the post office and he was the postmaster. He owned a couple of sailing ships which brought mail down into Titusville, which he distributed into the region. We were on the Pony Express, and I believe the mail came out of Jacksonville. So he basically founded the town. He built the first Titus Hotel, which we'll talk about, and he was here about 20 years or so, and then he passed on. There's no record of what his wife did, or at least I haven't found any. So here's an early map of when Titusville was first platted out. Now it's hard for you to see. The street running from lower right to upper right is Washington Avenue. The streets running left to right, the lower one is Main Street, and the upper one is Broad Street. So the corner of Main Street and Washington would be that corner on the lower right, right next to parcel 6, between parcel 6 and parcel 7. On the lower right, you'll see a U-shaped building. That was the original plot for the Titus Hotel, which was one of the most beautiful hotels in the state of Florida at that time. We'll talk a little more about it. It was U-shaped, so all the rooms could look out on this garden veranda. And it was later incorporated into the Dixie Hotel after Colonel Titus passed away. But this was the original organization, and you see there are 9 city blocks here, plus a parcel down on the river. This is how they organized Titusville when they first started to build it. So here's a photo of early downtown Titusville. You see the roads are still dirt. They had to be dirt because there really weren't any motor cars at that point. I don't know what year this was, but it was early on. The buildings are still wood. You see there are telegraph lines and maybe even some electric lines strung up on the tops of the poles there. And you see the horse and the buggy waiting at the curb. Typical Florida construction, you see a porch that comes all the way out to the street, and people walked under that porch to keep out of the sun and the rain. This was probably before the fire, so it was probably before 1895. Here's another picture of the downtown area. This is later. You'll see there's motor cars. This is probably 1925 or so. The building on the right is the bank building, which is now, I think, abandoned. On the left side, right in front of that car, is where the Brevard Museum, North Brevard Museum, would be, and right next to that would be the Playa Linda brewery, and on the right side was the area where Cafe Chocolat was, the pizza place, and things like that. But you see the buildings are brick at this point. They've been rebuilt, and the downtown looks pretty much the way it does today, although there have been some changes, obviously. So here is another picture of, this is looking on the corner of Washington and Julia. This is what we would call Julia Court today. The building on the left is what later became Downtown Dave's. I'll show you a picture of that. Looking straight ahead, you're going to see the area that was adjacent to the Dixie Hotel. You notice this picture has some cars in it, so it's probably a little bit later. It's probably 1925 or 1930 or something like that. You see there are power lines already strung, so we have. Now, at the time Titusville was founded, there really was no train service down here. The only way to get around the state at that time was steamboats. The steamboats came from Miami up to Jacksonville. They stopped in Titusville, so Titusville began to grow. It went through a slight boom period when we had the steamboat traffic. The steamboats went up through the Holiver Canal, and they went up through the Mosquito Lagoon, up through the Halifax River, and on up to Jacksonville. When the steamboats stopped at Titusville, of course, it brought a lot of money into the town. And later on, we got a train service, but at this time, there was no train service. Although one was promised, it was never really delivered. So the Colonel, here's a plaque for the Titus House. The Colonel built a really beautiful hotel right after he got here, down on the Indian River. And as I said, it was one of the most elaborate and beautiful hotels in the state of Florida. After he passed away, it became a part of the Dixie Hotel, but this was for the steamboat travelers. Now, here is a picture of the downtown area. This is in 1895. This is just prior to the fire. Now, as you might guess, everything downtown at that time was built of wood. They tried to get insurance on it. They tried to get fire insurance on it, and the insurance companies told them there was no way they're going to insure wood buildings that have been sitting out in the hot Florida sun for 30 years and gotten dry as kindling, so they couldn't get insurance on it. But almost everything was wood, and so guess what happened? Here's a picture before the fire, and the next picture is a picture after the fire. Not everything was destroyed, but almost everything was destroyed. And certainly you see there's some people standing on the sidewalks looking at what amounts to ash and cinder. So now Titusville has gone through at least one boom cycle, and it's basically been burned to the ground. Not everything burned, but enough burned where it's now going basically down and through a contraction cycle. But Titusville, being Titusville, it rebuilt. And so after the fire, what we see next is the area is going to go through a slight boom cycle again. Eventually, the trains did come here. For a short period, the trains came to Titusville and stopped, and freight was moved from the train station over to the boats and moved further south by boat. But that didn't last very long. Eventually, Flagler built the train all the way down to Key West. Here's the early train station in Titusville. I don't know if that building's there today, but you can see where it was. For those of you who know where the Parish Theater is, it's over behind the Parish Theater on the train tracks, which are still the same train tracks that were being used then. So we did get train service. Now, when we got train service, it really was a boon for agriculture. The primary agriculture in those days was, of course, oranges. But we could now get oranges up to northern markets much faster, prevent spoilage. And so the profit margin on oranges went way up when we got the train. So oranges became an even more important crop to Central Florida once the train was here. There was no real need to go on steamboat anymore because the train could get you places faster and cheaper. So at this time, we now had another very large hotel down on the water, the Dixie Hotel. And the Dixie Hotel was one of the largest hotels in the state. It eclipsed the Titus House, and you see a picture of it here. It was a very imposing structure. And it was around for a long time until it was torn down to make way for some new construction. And for those of you who are familiar with this next building, this is where the Dixie Hotel was. This is the current building that's on that site, and this is just a block behind the downtown area. And so you see this was the site of the Dixie Hotel. Those piers that you see there going out into the river, by the way, are for the most part no longer there, courtesy of our last two hurricanes. Okay, so now Titusville is going through another growth period. This is showing the downtown area looking north. Now again, the left would be where the North Brevard Historical Museum and Playa Linda are. On the right side is where the typical downtown area is today. And now you see the downtown has been rebuilt. A lot of these structures are no longer wood. They're now brick and stone. We kind of learned our lesson about building out of things that are that flammable. But now you see the streets are paved. So Titusville continues to grow despite the fact that it was at one point burned to the ground. Now, following this, we finally decided we were going to have a fire department. I'm sure there was a fire department before, but they couldn't really do that much with wooden buildings. So here is the 1925 fire department with their fire engine. Fine-looking young men. I have to say, I think this was probably a posed picture, because I can't imagine anybody that's going to go and fight fires in white shirts and white pants, but I could be wrong. So now we have a fire department with a firehouse, and the city is becoming a really honest-to-goodness city with social services, police departments, fire departments, and the like. Just to show how the city has at least made an effort to preserve its history, we've actually preserved some of the original houses. This is the Carter House. This is not a typical, what we would call cracker construction, but it's very close. In cracker construction, the houses are off the ground to let air circulate under them. There was always a porch, at least on one side, and usually on three. Often there was a porch on the second floor. We call those a sleeping porch, and people would come out and bring their beds out there in the summer to sleep because it was cooler. This one is slightly different. You see there's a fireplace for heating the house. The second floor is large windows so that the air could enter on the first floor and basically vent out the top. And this was a typical of this area at that time. Now, the next house you're going to see is the Pritchard House. This was quite an elaborate house, particularly for the state. This is construction you will see not only in the south, but you will see up north. You see on the ground floor is a porch that goes all the way around the house, but on the second floor, there's only a porch on one corner. And these were not for sleeping, these were simply for sitting out in hot weather. This house, again, was heated with a fireplace. There was probably a fireplace both in the first and the second floor. And it's a very large house. The city recently bought this and moved it. It's now moved off a site that's just off the downtown area between North and South Washington, right in back of the fire station. This was a wooden house, and so this house was very susceptible to fire also. But it's there. You can go drive by it. And then during this slight boom phase, a funny thing happened. We became adjacent to one of the largest technological endeavors in the history of mankind. From the 1950s to about the early 2000s, we became adjacent to the Cape Kennedy Space Center, which brought in a number of high-paying jobs, was a boon for education, and so we went through our biggest boom period for about 50 years. There was only two ways on to the Cape. One is the northern route, which took you through Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach. One is the southern route, which took you to Edgewater and Titusville. So a lot of people made their home in Titusville because it was more of a residential, less of a tourist area. And we had a lot of high-paying jobs, built a lot of construction, and really the boom area of Titusville was during that period. We see here a rocket going off. It was a area for both the Air Force that used the facilities and the civilian NASA which used the facilities. Now, during this boom period, my friend, who was a civic leader at the time, I'm not going to tell you who he was, said that Titusville at that time, because of all the money coming into it, was very much like the old West towns during the gold rush. There was a hotel right on the river behind where Qualms is today, for those of you who know where Qualms is. That was, I believe, a Howard Johnson's, and they had a bar and lounge on the first floor. He said all the powers that be in Titusville went and had a drink there after work, and everybody could talk to everybody else. He says he remembers one time walking in, and the mayor of Titusville and some other guy, which I don't remember who he told me it was, were on the floor wrestling, trying to hit each other in the head with bottles. And he said it was so common that nobody even bothered to take much notice of it. He said there was fistfights in there was bottles thrown across the room. He said it was very much the Wild West for a few years. But Titusville weathered the boom area and went on for about 50 years in fairly stable growth until the early 2000s, when NASA contracted and began to shut down, and we lost about 70 to 80% of our workforce. So after the boom, this is what the downtown area looked like. This is in the area of Julia Court. This is called the historic downtown area. You can tell it's historic because it says historic right there. So a lot of things are left in Titusville after the fall, as you were. This is what the downtown area looked like in the early 2000s. There's Dave's Downtown Lounge, for those of you who remember that. Edie and I spent a lot of happy hours in there. And this is what the downtown area looked like until a few years ago. And then we went through another change, and now the downtown area has the Grand Martini Bar, which is right there. So this is what the downtown area looks like today. So Titusville is now going through another metamorphosis where we're less depending on the space program and we're developing other interests. And we probably will weather it just fine. This is what the area of Julia Court looked like a few years ago. I liked it. I liked the brick. I liked the trees. But the city didn't want to let it go at that. So now we have a new area in Julia Court. That's the new improved area with these things. Now, one thing I will say about these is they give you some shade down there. And so in hot weather, although nobody really goes there in the daytime, but they do give you some shade. I wouldn't get too attached to these things because I don't think they'll be there after the next hurricane, but what do I know? So Titusville continues to go through boom and bust phases. We're now coming out of it. We're getting another growth in population. Things are starting to improve here. And hopefully we're not going to have another fire like the last one. We've actually done a few things to improve that. This is a picture of Ember the fire clown. Now Titusville has our own fire clown, and I'm told this fire clown has been to Fire Clown College. Even though a lot of people are creeped out by clowns, they still think that this fire clown is going to help us learn proper fire safety. Frankly, I think she's kind of creepy, but that's just me. All right, well, that brings us to the close. Let's see what else we got going.
We are back. Hi.
Our next section, we're going to talk about some restaurants over the course of the next few months. We'll talk about some bars that we know. Edie and I spend a lot of time in bars. And some places that we eat. This next place is easy to talk about because it's one of my favorites, and it's run by a great couple. And the only problem is I've used some pictures of my lovely wife without her permission, so things may get a little testy around my house. Before we go further, let's do a quick commercial. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Veronica's Barbershop, 811 Cheney Highway. Senior cuts, $8. Regular cuts, $10. Veronica is licensed as both a barber and a cosmetologist. She is listed in the state of Florida as a master barber. She's one of the few around that is. She is licensed as a massage therapist, and she's also a medical assistant. So no matter what problems you got, she can probably take care of you. Soft drinks, water, hot steam towels, always free, as are smiles if you can get one from her. Okay, so let's go on and talk about Heroes Grill. We'll be right back.
Edie, tonight under Eateries and Watering Holes, I want to talk about one of my favorite places, Heroes Grill. Heroes Grill is on South Street in Titusville, almost right across from the Sheriff's Department, just down the street a little bit and on the other side of the road. It's run by a couple of young people who are retired military. They have two sons that are still in the military. In fact, their younger son has an appointment to the Naval Academy, and in addition, he has been the starting cornerback on what was a very good, in fact, one of the best football teams in the history of the Naval Academy. So they're a good group to know. They're really a nice bunch of people. And I go in there at least once or twice a week, so I'm unabashedly a fan of them. I originally went in there for the barbecue, the pulled pork, the brisket. I soon discovered the fried chicken sandwich. My wife and daughter love their chicken wings. They say they have the best chicken wings around. And recently I have discovered the portobello mushroom burger, and I have found true love. They have submarines. They also have a number of burgers. My grandson went on a quest one summer of finding the best bacon burger in the state. He must have eaten enough bacon to kill a normal person, but he has pronounced Heroes Bacon Burger, the Cowboy, as one of the best around. So the prices are reasonable. Their sandwiches are anywhere from about $4.50 to about $6 or $7. It's a small restaurant, so sometimes you have to wait a bit for a table. But their food is absolutely the best around. It's very consistent. They have soft drinks as well as beer. You can get a submarine in there as well as brisket, pulled pork, and other sandwiches like burgers and things like that. The only one disadvantage, and it's because it's a small restaurant, is they have a small kitchen, which means your food is going to come out as it's prepared, which means not everybody at the table necessarily is going to be served at once. So it's not a problem for us. Usually the food is pretty hot when it comes out. We have to wait a bit, but you won't necessarily get everybody served at exactly the same time. I feel it's a small price to pay for having really good quality food at an affordable price. So for those of you who are looking for a local place, it's not fancy, but the food is great. The people are wonderful. It's a friendly place you'll really enjoy going to. Heroes Grill on South Street. Give it a try.
We are back, and this is a section where we want to introduce you to Prince Electra Diamond. He is a performance artist, and he goes all out when he does his performing. He's a very nice young man. He really takes himself seriously. He does covers of electronics as well as originals. But if you aren't into dance trance, you probably haven't heard any of them.
We want to bring him to you because we don't think you'll ever see him otherwise. And he's a force of nature. You may not like his music, you may like his music. He's somewhat of an acquired taste, but he's an original, and he's very effective in what he does. If you see him live, you're going to see him on a video, and it's not the same effect.
No, it's not.
But it'll give you an idea. You can see him almost every Thursday over at Rogue's Pub on Curry Ford in Orlando, and he's auditioning for different talent shows periodically. He hasn't made it through into the second round yet, but I think he will. So let's take a look at Prince Electra Diamond. We're going to sign off. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.
We're going to conclude this show with our musical guest, who is a young man that Edie and I know pretty well. We have met him over at Rogue's Pub in Orlando, and Edie and I play there once a month or so, and we've gotten to know him over the years. His name is Prince Electra Diamond. He's a terrific young guy. He is a very serious performance artist. Now, for those of you who don't know what a performance artist is, I want you to think back of early David Bowie. First time I saw David Bowie, he was wearing a feathered boa around his neck and had plaster hands across his chest as he sang. Last time I saw him, he was doing a duet wearing a tweed jacket with Bing Crosby. Performance artists are into the entire art, not just the music, not just the visual, but merging everything together. And Prince has done a very good job of this. A lot of his music is originals. He choreographs his own stuff. He works hard at it. He tried out for one of the TV shows. It was either The Voice or America's Got Talent or one of them out at Disney. And unfortunately, they didn't pick him for the second round, which I think was a mistake. But as I said, his music is something of an acquired taste, but you can at least appreciate the originality of it. And that's what I like about him, is everything he does, you won't see anywhere else. And so here is Prince Electra Diamond to close us out, and we'll see you next time.
I was in love, your pronunciation, and your mind's a trial. Never do I want to be with another, only you I want to smother. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. We're in a perfect palace now, like a marble statue stand proud. I hope the feeling between us the same, and we only have that to play. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. Your king mine is all the time to call. I was faithful to your promise not to fall. Why would I, why ultimately this beautiful dream? Your king mine is all the time to go. I was faithful to your promise not to fall. Why would I, why ultimately this beautiful dream? Your king mine is all the time to go. I was faithful to your promise not to fall. Why would I, why ultimately this beautiful dream? Yes, I do believe I pray to have for dying, cause I love you, I love you. Yes, I do believe I pray to have for dying, cause I love you, I love you. We're probably out to time. I remember way in Japan. Be careful not to cry again, or I'm already being in this pain. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. You came by the side of time to go. I was faithful to your promise not to fall. Why would I, why ultimately this beautiful dream? You came by the side of time to go. I was faithful to your promise not to fall. Why would I, why ultimately this beautiful dream? Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you. Yes, I do believe I pray to have from dying, cause I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. You're beautiful now, inside and out. I love you, I love you.